right, welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Making Monsters. We are rolling on with my draft series. Every year I do this. Every year it's so much fun because this is when I really get to know some of these prospects, maybe not so much those for the top prospects, but a little bit deeper into the draft. And this year the Bears picking 10. There's been a lot of picking high for the Bears in recent years. So another year, hopefully one of the final years of that. But I'm joined today by Ryan Roberts. He covers the NFL draft and college football for A to Z Sports. Very close and ties to the Notre Dame program. So today, Ryan, we're going to talk a little bit about the draft in general and the Bears' place at 10, but also get into some of those Notre Dame guys that you and I both like. So thanks for hopping on with me.
Absolutely, I'm glad this is like a qualm to my sanity a little bit today because I get to talk about NFL draft and Notre Dame, which
I
drive me
love
a little bit crazy at times of year. So I appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, of course. So let's just start with I'll start with my feelings of picking 10 this year. I hate it. I'll just say that because I
Yeah.
feel like the conversation is that there's only a few guys that are those blue chip players in this draft that people feel like are really worth those top picks in the NFL draft. And then you have some guys that have a lot of high ceilings or, maybe need a little bit more development or could be these players. But I feel like at 10, you're either going to have to get lucky that someone falls to you, or you're going to have to reach a little bit, which that's fine if it ends up working out. We've seen teams reach and it end up panning out for them. But let's start there. Your thoughts on that 10th pick and what kind of makes sense in that area for Chicago.
Yeah, so we actually just did a mailbag on the A to Z Sports Film Room channel on YouTube on Wednesday, and we talked. One of the questions was about trade back candidates, as far as like teams that could potentially trade back, and we mentioned the Bears because I think the Bears are in a unique circumstance because you said it perfectly. There's a very limited amount of blue chippers, but there's also a very minimal amount of first round true players in this
Yeah.
class. So in the 10th spot, like you're in kind of like no man's lands. And I feel like early on in this process, the Bears were kind of being projected to draft an offensive lineman, but obviously they attacked interior offensive linemen big time in free agency. So that might not even be their thought process with that first pick overall. So number 10 is kind of a difficult spots to project right now. Honestly, the Bears are like one of the hardest teams to mock for right now because,
Yeah.
I mean, they did a good job in free agency. Like they filled a lot of needs. They have some young players, a young nucleus, obviously with the new coach coming in and everything. So, but just overall, I agree with you. I don't think that 10 is the ideal spot in this class. If I was the Bears, I would be personally trying to move back if possible.
Yeah, and that's where, because if this was 2 months ago, people would say trenches hands down. You could go
Yeah.
defensive line or offensive line, and you would have said yes. But to your point, in free agency, they go and they get Grady Jarrett, they go and they get Dio and Jigbo, they go and they get Jonah Jackson and Joe Tooney and all of these guys to start filling in that, which I appreciate that because I do think it led them to not having to hammer at one position at 10. And maybe that the best player available is what ends up happening. We'll see how they kind of take this.
Yeah.
I just got done doing my episode on Will Campbell, and it made me love Will Campbell a little bit. So I'm like, if Will Campbell's there, do you still take that left tackle of the future potentially? I don't know. And it's also, what does that look like? Shedeur Sanders is slowly falling in a lot of mocks, and where he may go, we're hearing that maybe some of those teams at the top that we thought may draft a quarterback may not want to take Shedeur Sanders. How far does he drop? And so that brought me today. We were talking on Helmets and Heels about potentials of what could happen to Shedeur. And if he doesn't go in that top, do you see a world if he starts to fall a little bit that someone like the Saints jumps on that?
It's possible. I do think that a slide could potentially happen. Funny enough, Eric Edholm, who's over at NFL.com, who I'm very close with, I like him a lot. He actually had a Shedeur Sanders trade at 15, I believe.
Wow.
So someone trading up to 15. I think it was the Cleveland Browns coming back into round one to pick 15 to take Shedeur. I think that a Shedeur fall can happen
Mm-hmm.
because I think that early on in this process, we as a media and as a general public kind of hypnotized ourselves into believing that there were two really good quarterbacks that were going to go 1 and 2 in this class in Cam Ward and Shedeur Sanders. I think the
Mm-hmm.
further you get removed from that bias, you start like really isolating Shedeur. And there's
Yeah.
a lot to like about Shedeur, but there's also, like arm strength is very middling, athleticism is very middling. Like he's not an exciting prospect at all. So I do think that he's the type of prospect that could fall down a little bit. The question is the team believe in him enough to mortgage capital to be able to move up high enough to get a player? But I think what's working in his advantage right now is that it's Cam Ward in tier one, in my opinion, right now in this class, which is why he's going to go first overall. I also think that Shador is in tier 2 by himself. Like some people are trying to make like Jackson Dart in that same
Yeah.
tier. They're trying to make Jalen Milroe even in that same tier. I just don't think either one of those guys are in the same tier as Shador Sanders. So that could make a team justify moving up to getting their player because there are still some quarterback needy teams out there. Not as much after free agency, which happens every
Mhm.
single year. But that's a long winded answer to say, yes, I think that he can be a trade up candidate because we already talked about it. There's a lack of blue chippers.
Yeah.
There's a lack of just pure first round grades and there's a lack of quarterback talent in this class. So if a fall happens to quarterback 2 in this group, I wouldn't be shocked if someone trades up into the back end of the top 10 or the back end of the top 15 in Eric Edholm's scenario that he laid out as well.
I'm going to give you a couple what ifs, and I'm going to start with the big one. That is a big question mark around Chicago. It's pretty much what everybody's arguing about right now is what if this person is there at 10? Do they take them? And that's Ashton Genty. Ashton
Right.
Genty is that conversation that if somehow Ashton Genty is there at 10, which it looked like for a while, no possible way. Recent mocks kind of have him falling to 10. And the Bears, who we know just hired Ben Johnson, and he had that Monty and Jahmyr Gibbs duo that worked so well and kind of made Jared Goff be able to be what Jared Goff was. And a lot of people know that Ben Johnson and Ryan Poles and all of the new everybody kind of formulating in Chicago have been very vocal about fixing the offensive line, fixing the run game, and that trickling down to helping Caleb Williams. What if Ashton Genty is there? Is that, in your opinion, would that be a can't miss for the Bears or no?
Well, I think Ashton Genty is a top 5 player in this class, just overall. So if we're talking about a top 5 player going at pick 10, it is a value in just the traditional sense, right? That is a value. Chicago is a very nuanced conversation because DeAndre Swift, I know, didn't have a great year last year, but you already mentioned there are reasons for that, right? Like you had a young passing game, you had an interior offensive lineman that completely needed to get restructured. I would argue that in a better situation, DeAndre Swift is a good NFL running back. I mean, we saw it with Philadelphia the year prior, right? So I think that he is good enough to be the lead back. But to answer that question, if they drafted him at Genty at number 10, I would not say a word about it. And I would be happy if I was a Chicago Bears fans because he is probably the best all-around back that has come out of the draft in several years. I mean, I would even say he's a better all-around back than Bijan Robinson. Now, Bijan was a more explosive, exciting athlete, maybe a little bit of a higher ceiling. But I was just talking to an agent the other day where I'm just like, what does Ashton Genty not do well? Right? Like, and the answer is nothing really. I mean, he can catch the football. He was literally
Yeah.
a all conference, all area receiver at Lone Star in the state of Texas when he was in high school.
Yeah.
He can pass block. He can run the football very well. I mean, so I would say that if Chicago drafted him at 10, I'd be completely fine with it. I would be happy with it. And I think that he is a value at that spot because he is one of the small number of true first rounders in this class and arguably a blue chipper in this group as well.
Yeah, you see those charts where it breaks down Ashton Genty when it comes to those missed tackles and the yards after contact. And that makes like running back fans drool looking at those things of like how good he was at that. And that was something DeAndre Swift doesn't really have. DeAndre Swift is more of a finesse type guy. He likes to go on the outside. And there's a lot of, he's one of those guys to me where he was getting 4 yards or 25 yards. And there was like no in between with DeAndre Swift. And granted, like I said, and as you said, there's other factors to that. There were things last year that were just not working scheme wise, schematically, and on the offensive line. A few other names I'm going to pop out before we get to these Notre Dame guys and just getting your opinion on them. Some of the guys that I've seen mocked at that 10. And so one, I just don't see a world where he's there, but I'm going to name them. And we're just going to play the what if game. Armand Membo is going to be one. Kelvin Banks is another. Mikael Williams is another. And Shamar Stewart. Those 4 names are 4 names that I've seen at the possibility of 10 positional needs for the Bears. Thoughts on those? Just quick little thoughts on each of those.
Yeah, I think for me, Membo is probably not going to be there, like you're saying. I think there's a realistic chance that New England could draft him potentially at number 4, so he might be off the board. He's a pure right tackle though, and it's what he's been. I know that some people project that he could play left tackle. It's possible, but like he's literally never played anything but right tackle in his career. So unless you're thinking about Darnell Wright moving or him moving, like it gets a little bit clunky overall, right? Yeah. So that's just kind of an interesting one. I think that Kelvin Banks would be a solid pick at that spot because he could play interior offensive line. He could play offensive tackle. He's got that versatility to him. Shamar Stewart's really exciting, but it really depends on like what the window is for Chicago that they want to achieve, because he's more of a year 2, year 3 breakout than getting a lot out of him as a rookie, because he's very raw technically, but he's an exciting athlete. And
Yeah.
Michael Williams is a little bit of the same. Michael's a little bit of a higher end run defender than Shamar is right now, so he could probably play a lot more as a rookie and contribute. But overall, like they are both developmental edges that I think year 2, year 3, year 4 of a rookie contract, like that's really when you're talking about them being breakout players potentially for your team.
Is this edge class to you a little underwhelming, or is it just one of the edge classes that you feel like in a few years we'll be talking about a little bit more? They're just guys that need that developmental part of the NFL.
There's a lot of developmental guys in the class. I will say this, before the season, I was really excited about this edge group because I've looked at guys like James Pierce Jr. and Michael Williams and some of these guys, and I'm like, Nick Skorton out of Texas A&M, literally Shamar Stewart's teammate on the other side. I looked at those guys and I was like, that's exciting. Like that's a lot of upside, a lot of talent to kind of delve into. But I think a couple of those guys kind of took a step back a little bit, right? Like James Pierce Jr. stagnated to a degree. Scarton, I think, put on some bad weight at Texas A&M comparative to where he was at Purdue. And some guys just kind of trended downward a little bit. Now, luckily, we have had guys like Mike Green ascend upward. We've had Shamar Stewart at least showcase that he has that type of talent. So but it's not as quite as good as I thought it was going to be. It's still a good class overall, one of the better groups, but I would be lying if I didn't say that I did think at one time the edge group would be even better than it is right now.
The Shamar Stewart one scares me a little bit because I've heard so many things. I tweeted this yesterday. Someone wrote an article and it was like a former scout commenting on him. And the former scout pretty much said, like, it's one of those guys. I feel like I need to pull up the exact quote because it was just like the way he worded it. I was like, this terrifies me, but I feel like he's one of those guys where if he hits, he's going to hit. Oh, so he said he's the classic example of a guy who has no idea how to play football. And so he goes in and he's like, he doesn't know how to block. He doesn't know how to use his hands. He doesn't know how to do this, and this, but he's really athletic. So like maybe it ends up panning out.
It's I think anxiousness is the best way to describe Shamar Stewart as a fan and a spectator, because you see it, right? Like you see it.
There's something there.
There is 100% something there. He's 6'5 plus. He's 200. He played at about 275 this past year. He ran 4.59. He had explosive. He had like a 40-inch vert, and like on film, it's there. You see it. You just don't see it enough. Like he doesn't finish plays enough. Like that's the biggest thing. But you hope that he can finish more plays because he's long and he's explosive and closing speed and length. That's how you finish more plays ultimately on the next level. So I have hopes for him, but I'd be okay with someone even mortgaging a top 10 pick for him in this class because it's not a great class and he has a ton of upside. But yes, anxious because it's either going to be great and he's going to be one of the best defensive ends in the NFL, or he can't play. Like, and there's not much in between ground, which is a little bit unsettling for a lot of people, obviously.
Is there a guy that, because I keep hearing the Mike Green a lot, actually, this last couple of days when I'm mentioning the edge, a lot of people have mentioned that name to me and I'm not super familiar with him. But the one thing that I think we have to focus on in Chicago at this point in time is that Dennis Allen is the defensive coordinator now. And Dennis Allen loves the big guys on the edge. We talk about a Cam Jordan and stuff like that. Is there anybody in this draft that, not saying it's not fair to compare somebody to a Cam Jordan, but that has that body type that you think would fit a Dennis Allen defense?
Yeah, I think that Nick Skorton that I mentioned a little bit ago, Texas A&M, he's down more in like the 260, 265 range, but his best is a lot of what makes Cam Jordan really exciting, right? Like he is more like first step explosive and really crafty. I wouldn't call Cam Jordan like a bendy edge rusher. Like he's not that type of guy. He's explosive, he's powerful, and he's really tactical. Those are the things that make Cam Jordan good. Scourton is a lot like that. Now, you can get a value on him because I think at his best and at a good playing weight, because again, like I don't know why Texas A&M did this last year, but they decided he came in and they're like, we're going to play you at 280 something pounds. So they made him gain like 20 plus pounds from his playing weight at Purdue. And he just didn't look like the same player. He's down to 257 now at the combine, which was great to see. He lost a lot of that bad weight. When he's at his best though, he is a first round player in my opinion. Like he is slam dunk first round player. The problem is that the 2024 film is not first round film, which is why he's going to be more in the top 50 range than the top 32 range. He's probably going to be picked 30s, 40s, somewhere in that ballpark. But to answer your question directly, like, yes, he is a guy that fits that profile. Big body, physical, explosive. I think that you can throw like a JT Tuimoloau out of Ohio State into that conversation as well. He's a little bit further down the board as well, more of a day 2 target. But yes, there are a couple guys I do think Dennis Allen will take a liking to in this group.
Yeah, and one of the I feel like the most exciting things about the Bears draft this year is they have 2 second-round picks. So those 2 second-round picks, I think with somebody like that, I think the value is there, definitely. And it'll be fascinating to see how they approach it. But let's get into some of these Notre Dame guys. The obviously first one I want to talk about is my guy, Xavier Watts. I love Watts, and I think that the Bears aren't in a position to where they absolutely need a safety. I think Kevin Byard and Jaquan Brisker are really good safeties. We saw that in the beginning of this last season. They were vibing together. Unfortunately, Jaquan Brisker now back-to-back seasons with concussions. And this last year, it ended the season for pretty much half of his year. That's scary that you have to kind of start planning for those things. And what if something else like this happens? What if it's worse? You like depth anyways. But Xavier Watts to me is somebody, he's one of those ball hawking safeties. If you watched any of the college football playoffs, you saw what an impact he made on almost every single down. And that's what I love about him is he's all over the place. But tell us a little bit about Watts. What are you expecting from him? What type of defense do you think he'll fit in best?
He's a fascinating backstory because coming out of high school in the Omaha area, he was a wide receiver defensive back recruit. So he was recruited as an athlete. And originally he was actually playing wide receiver at Notre Dame. So he went from like wide receiver to nickel to wide receiver to safety to wide receiver to eventually they were just like, okay, you're just going to play safety. That's what you're going to be, right? Like, so eventually they did that. And lo and behold, he has 13 interceptions the last 2 years because he has tremendous ball skills, wide receiver background I just mentioned, but he's really, really smart and instinctive. He's one of those guys that just always seems to be in the right spot. Like he's just never in the wrong spot. He might miss a tackle occasionally, but it's not because he's in a wrong spot. He is always in where he needs to be in defensively from the system perspective. He makes a lot of really good plays. He's got great ball skills. I think he's more of a too high safety type that you're going to use versatility from a coverage perspective. He's not a true center fielder. I think he can rotate to the middle field at times, but I want him to be able to play some too high, play hash to the sideline, come down in some robber coverage at times, rotating down. Like he is one of those guys that anticipates passing lanes as well as anybody in this class. And if you want a guy that's going to create turnovers, that's what Xavier Watts majors in at this point.
Yeah, and that's why it's funny because during the college football playoff, the one pick he had, it pretty much just came straight to him. And everyone was like that. It was almost like an accident. I was like, nothing Xavier Watts does is an accident. He is in that place for a particular reason.
After 13 times in 2 years, it's not an accident anymore. He's just in the right spot at all times. Yes.
Exactly. And he's just so fun. And that's what, when we talk about this, when you talk about the Notre Dame defense and how many injuries they had towards once they got into the college football playoff, the list was adding, it was growing and growing as time went. Xavier Watts was somebody that you felt like even as a safety, which you usually don't count on your safeties making up for other position groups not being there, when it came to him started getting pressures on the quarterback, him like in coverage and him being able to tackle middle field, all of these things you still saw him kind of step up and be able to do when he had to, because you kind of felt like he was forced into that role to be everything at certain situations. And so I do think if you're talking about him, where are you expecting for him to lie? I know when you look at the PFF website, they have him as like the 39th prospect. Where are you expecting Watts to ultimately go?
I think in the early portion of the second round, early to mid portion of the second round, I think is the sweet spot for him. It's a good safety class, but I think it's wide open for safety 3, and I think it's going to be Xavier Watts in the end, because I look at it and I say, Nick Emenwari, the tremendous athlete out of South Carolina, and Malachi Starks out of Georgia, they're kind of fighting for who's the first safety off the board, but I think whoever loses that battle is going to be safety 2. But other than that, it's like Kevin Winston Jr. is a pretty good player out of Penn State, but like I think Xavier Watts is a lot cleaner of a prospect because Kevin Winston Jr. is coming off of an injury this past year that cost him the entirety of the year outside of one football game. So I think that Xavier Watts is cleaner in the sense of he doesn't have an injury history. He's had great ball production the last 2 years. He's a really good kid as well. I mean, he was a captain for the team. So like he kind of checks a lot of boxes. So if I had to predict today, I think he's definitely a top 50 player in this class for sure. Wouldn't be shocked if he goes in somewhere in the 30s when it all is said and done. And I think that you're getting a starting safety for the foreseeable future.
Yeah, and same. And that's why I don't know if the Bears I would love it. Like I know people would probably be like, why? We already have 2 safeties, but I think he's a game changer when it comes to that area. And again, when we talk about a Dennis Allen defense, who technically is a secondary guy, like that is his specialty. So I could see him kind of eyeing somebody like that, but it would be a little bit difficult when you're talking about taking somebody that high that you pretty much want to be one of the starters on your team. Let's slide over now to the corner position. Another honestly interesting one when it comes to Chicago, because Jalen Johnson, one of the best corners in the NFL. I love Jalen Johnson. He just got a contract recently, so that is your number one corner. Kyler Gordon, he's about to get a contract. If the Bears don't extend him, I'm going to be very angry. He's been one of the better nickel corners also. On the other side, there's questions. Tyreek Stevenson has had moments. There's a lot of ups and downs from Tyreek Stevenson. We saw it this last year. The Hail Mary game was because of Tyreek Stevenson. That's a discipline thing. But there's a lot of moments where you just feel like he doesn't really know where he's supposed to be on the field. And then there's some games where he's what looks like the best athlete on the field. So it's kind of strange. And so when you go to a guy like Benjamin Morrison, I think some of the concern for a lot of people is just that injury. It's a hip injury, and how bad is it? How bad is that injury? How strong can he get, or how much, how much strength is back from that? So let's start there with just the injury and what you've heard from Benjamin Morrison and what's going on with that hip injury and how it's looking.
I haven't heard anything, which is a good thing. I think we talked about this before. Like this time of year, you hear negative from like the injury perspective. Like you're hearing about medical rechecks not going well, guys getting red flagged, like all those types of things. I haven't heard anything negatively about Benjamin Morrison. I've heard that he's actually, he's well on his timeline of recovery and all that type of stuff. So I'm hopeful for him. It is a little bit, it's a little bit concerning though, and I know we've spoken about this briefly in the past, but like he was a kid that coming into the year, you love the instincts, you love the natural coverage ability, you like the ball skills, like a lot of cool stuff there, but it was the play strength. He's never been a very good tackler. He's struggled in contested catch situations at times at Notre Dame. So you wanted him to get stronger, and he was coming off of a preseason shoulder injury already, which is going to cost him some time, obviously, for strength purposes. But then also the hip is, it's scary, it is for a corner. I mean, when we're talking about corners, we're talking about plant and go. We're talking about turning and run. We're talking about, flexibility in the lower half. We're talking about hip fluidity. Like we're talking about all those things. Yeah. And a guy that has a compromised hip doesn't mean that he won't get back to his first form, but we also don't really hear about corners getting hip injuries a lot. Like that's a pretty uncommon injury, for the quarterback position. So I am in a wait and see mode as far as like his long term, if he gets back to full health. If he gets back to full health, then someone's going to get a bargain in this class, I think, but it is one of those situations that I feel like you're not really going to know if he's back to full health until he gets back on the field and you see him kind of really tested in full game action. So it's good that I haven't heard anything, but I'm still a little bit in wait and see mode as far as like how that recovery really affects his physical profile long term.
Yeah, and this is a division where you're talking about covering Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison and Amon-Ra St. Brown and Sam Laporta and the list of Green Bay. I don't think Green Bay has that true number one yet, but you have Dontavian Wicks there and Tucker Kraft, who went off this last. So there's so many weapons in the NFC North that you have to plan to be able to cover. And to my point earlier, I don't know if they're giving up on Tyreek. I would guess they'd give him a little bit more chance because there's too much there in moments where Tyreek Stevenson looks like he can be really good. And the way that him and Jalen work together has flowed well in certain times. But it is something to where in this division, it's something you do have to focus on because it's a position group that is getting tested 6 times a year at least, just in the division of who you're having to kind of keep up with. Do you think he is a true, like he'll be an outside corner though?
Yeah, he has to be an outside corner. I don't think he has any inside flexibility really, because the one thing that we don't talk about enough with like inside corners or slot corners is yes, like mirroring and matching and hip fluidity is really important. And he has those things in a vacuum, but you also have to fit against the run. Like you have to be a good tackler and a good player in the run defense. And it's just not really Ben's game. Like Ben's a coverage corner. He's not a physical dude. I mean, last year in 2023, he missed a ton of tackles, and it's not really a strength of his game. So yes, this is a pure outside corner. He played mostly boundary at Notre Dame to like the short side of the field, but I do think he could play either side, or if you're a left and right team, I don't think that'll matter overall.
All right. Let's go to Jack Kaiser. He's another name that I'm kind of going down. I skipped over Riley Leonard. I don't think the Bears will be drafting Riley Leonard. But Jack Kaiser, I think, is an interesting one. There's so many back and forth that I've heard about him. Some people see a lot in their game that they think could be developed properly. The interesting thing to me is where Jack Kaiser you believe would fit on an NFL roster, because when you go with what the Bears have right now, they when they got rid of Roquan, Jack Sanborn, undrafted free agent, stepped up, kind of took over that role at middle linebacker. But then they got Tremaine Edmonds. So now Tremaine Edmonds and TJ Edwards, those are your two linebackers. So whoever comes in here would be more of a Sam linebacker or the backup behind one of those two if an injury were to happen. So that is what's fascinating in the linebacker area when it comes to relating to the Bears. So a little bit about Jack, what type of linebacker would you project him to be at the next level?
Yeah, he's a fascinating player because before this past season, he played in Notre Dame's 4-2-5 system. He played the rover spot, which is basically a Sam linebacker, right?
Yeah.
So like he played that a lot in his career. This past year, to get him on the field more, he moved the will linebacker to the weak side position, and he did really well. I mean, he led them in tackles. He's a rangy kid. I mean, he ran like 4.62, I think, at the pro day. He's explosive. He's athletic. There's a reason that he was playing that rover position because you're poised to play in space a whole lot more than what you're playing at will. So he can do those things. I think the biggest weaknesses to Jack though is just he's not the biggest guy of all time. He's got shorter arms, so his play strength is never going to be great. He's a run and chase guy, like he's a space guy. So in that scenario though, I think he could play some Sam linebacker for sure. I think that he can come up and he could play in reduced spots and he could definitely play out in space a decent amount if you're working against like a heavier personnel that wants to try to spread you out a little bit. Like I think he could do some of those things. But the one thing I know about Jack Kaiser for certain, he's going to be great on special teams, right? So like we're talking about a day 3 football player that maybe has some developmental track, but he's going to be a core team special teamer. He's also a great kid, was like a multi-year captain for Notre Dame. So like he's not going to cause any mischief off the field or any of that type of stuff, right? Like he's going to come in, he's going to play special teams, and he's going to try to help a linebacker room. So if that's what the Bears need, that's what any team needs. I think that is a very solid day 3 selection because you need guys that can come in and do the little things that not a lot of people want to do.
Yeah, and the special teams they're the NFL at least is trying to make it more and more important with now the kickoff rules and the balls on the 35, and there's all of these things that they're trying to make change to kind of bring special teams back into the game. And that's one thing though, Ryan, I always tell people when we're talking about drafting Notre Dame guys is I'm always like, you're going to get a good, smart guy. Like that's one thing that you will be having when you're getting one of these. And that's why I already loved Cole Kmet. When the Bears drafted Cole Kmet, I was absolutely ecstatic because he's a good guy. He's a smart guy. He's a good football player. And if you can check all of those boxes, I think that's you have a big benefit.
Absolutely. No, I think Notre Dame players, it's because one, like it takes a special kind of person to even last at Notre Dame. Like it really does. Like I covered recruiting for a while for like the Notre Dame side of things. And like, you could tell very quickly, there's some kids that fit at Notre Dame and there's other kids that can't. Like, and Notre Dame just, with their history, with their education, with academics and everything that's involved in there, they attract some pretty like-minded individuals. And there's always going to be a rotten apple or two. I mean, that's at every school, it's at every program, but for the most part, yes, they attract smart individuals, usually have good leadership qualities and just good human beings. That's why it's like so rare all the time. Like anytime there comes a past story of like a Notre Dame player being like a bad guy off the field and like those such things, like it shocks us, right? Because it's like we don't hear about that stuff because it just doesn't generally happen. So yeah, Kaiser and those types of guys, Howard Cross, they all fit that same type of vantage point or viewpoint.
Yeah, I want to clump a couple people together in this one, and that is Riley Mills. You instantly saw what happened to Notre Dame's defensive front when Riley Mills wasn't there in the playoffs. It was devastating to have to see him go down when he did. I think there were moments that Howard Cross came in, and I was like, man, like this kid's stepping into some big shoes, and he stepped up in the moment several times during the college football playoff and times where it really took it was impressed to me. I was very impressed because it was one of the things I was concerned about once Riley went down. But talk about those two guys in general, their roles at Notre Dame and kind of where you see them when it comes to that defensive line and fitting in.
They're so fun because they're like the odd couple. They're so different. Like they couldn't be any different. Riley Mills is a 6'5" plus defensive end out of the state of Illinois originally that he came to Notre Dame and he was a strong side defensive end at like 265, 270 pounds. He's just gotten bigger and bigger and bigger. Now he's over 300 pounds. So his game is predicated on movement skills and length. That's the things. That's the way that he moves. He wins with a good first step. Not a great run defender, just naturally. I think he plays a little bit high. I don't think he's a naturally big guy either. Like I know he's bulked up to be a big guy, but he's not naturally that way, right? So I think he lacks a little bit of a little bit of anchor at the point of attack in some ways as well. So if you're drafting Riley Mills, you're drafting him to be an interior penetrator. Like you want him to be a 3-tech. You want him to be a guy that can get after the quarterback, can create some plays in the backfield. Howard Cross is completely different because Howard Cross is a shade over 6'1". He's 285 pounds, and his game says 3 technique, but Notre Dame put him at nose tackle and was just like, just do the job, right? And in 2023. He was great. He was great in 2023. 2024, he wasn't as good because he was banged up all year. I mean, if you watch like the Ohio State game or even just the playoffs in general, he's probably like 50% healthy, and like he's doing his best, but like clearly he was not the same guy. When he's healthy though, he's got really good first step. He's flexible. I think that he will actually be a better NFL player than college player because I think that an NFL team is going to ask him to do something that he didn't do at Notre Dame, and that's to be a 3 technique and to rush the quarterback and to get after the quarterback because he's really explosive. He's got a good change of direction for an interior defensive lineman, plays hard, and he's got NFL bloodlines as well. His dad was a former NFL tight end for the New York Giants and a good football player as well. So I think that Howard Cross is going to surprise some folks because he's going to get drafted in like the 5th or 6th round probably now after like the banged up season. And I guarantee he's going to be like Sheldon Day or like one of those guys where like he carves out a role for like 6 or 7 years. And you're like, that was the guy I saw in 2023.
Yeah. And that's what the crazy part to me was because there were moments in the college football playoff where you're like, all right, this kid's still making plays. And you're saying that's at 50%. So like imagine 100% Howard Cross in those significant moments that you were hoping for. That was what like to me was the biggest bummer. And I know you being a Notre Dame fan too, the biggest bummer were just some of those injuries that hit that you felt would have really changed things massively when it came offensive line in general. We could go on for this for days. I was like that poor O-line by the time
I was going to say, Taylor, and I don't want to, this is a big statement obviously, but a fully healthy Notre Dame team, I think they beat Ohio State. Like I just did. I mean, we talked about it. Benjamin Morrison's out. Riley Mills is out. Howard Cross is banged up. Boubacar Traore was out the entirety of the second half of the season. Jordan Patello was out. You had obviously Anthony Knapp got injured for the national championship game as well. So they had to move Charles Jagasaw around. I mean, your starting center Ashton Craig was out. It was a lot of injury. So much. I mean, and we didn't even talk about like Jeremiah Love was very compromised in the last 2 games of that playoff run as well. So if everyone was healthy, I truly do think Notre Dame wins. Hopefully they get it done this year. But yes, it was very frustrating to see because I feel like we're going to do the what if. Like, what if Notre Dame was healthy? But like, it's real though. I mean, if they were fully healthy, I do think that Notre Dame possibly wins that football game. But, just wasn't meant to be, unfortunately.
Yeah, you had a left tackle out there who was not supposed to play this season. And then was like, oh, by the way, you're going to have to go play out there. And I was like, okay. It was a little frustrating, but I still think it was a run. And when you talk about maybe showcasing some of these other guys, it's not the cool thing about college football is maybe you get to talk about some players that you didn't get to. Now with the deeper run, the college football playoff too, you're seeing these guys play more football games, which is beneficial for us because we get more film to see. We get to see them in higher leverage situations. And so it's really fun. But Ryan, I really appreciate it. This was a good time. And I know I'm a little biased because I am a Notre Dame fan, but there are several of these guys that I wouldn't mind being in Chicago, but I appreciate your time. I know you stay busy, and I hope you have a good rest of your week.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. I always appreciate it.
Yep, thank you.